When King Robert Baratheon rode north to Winterfell, the Starks' lives changed forever. In the real story, Ned Stark rode south with his daughters, while Robb stayed in the north as the young lord. But in this telling, Ned made a different choice. He wanted Robb beside him, not just to learn the ways of court, but also because he felt an unease in his heart about the capital. So Robb Stark, only 15, strong and proud, joined his father on the long road to King's Landing. The journey itself was strange for Robb. He had grown up in the quiet of Winterfell, surrounded by snow and wolves, but the road south was full of faces he did not know and dangers he had never seen. He rode often with his half-brother Jon, until the fork where Jon turned toward the wall. Robb felt the weight of that goodbye heavier than he ever expected. Jon was more than a brother to him, and seeing him ride away toward cold exile made Robb's chest ache. King Robert was loud and cheerful, but Robb noticed how tired he seemed when no one watched. Ned was serious, always reminding Robb to listen more than he spoke. Arya and Sansa quarreled often, as sisters do, and Robb sometimes had to step in, playing the peacemaker. It made him feel older, as though he was already carrying a lord's duty. When they finally reached King's Landing, Robb's eyes widened at the city's size. He had never seen so many people crowded into one place. The stench, the noise, the markets, and the heat were overwhelming. He hated it at once, though he said nothing. Winterfell was open, honest, and clean in its coldness. This city was a cage of whispers and shadows. Still, he stayed close to Ned. Robb stood behind him in the throne room when Ned argued with the Lannisters, and he walked beside him in the gardens when Littlefinger spoke of hidden enemies. Robb began to see how dangerous this place was, not with swords, but with words sharper than any blade. He realized Winterfell had taught him to fight, but King's Landing would teach him whether he could survive the games of power. Cersei Lannister watched him with cold eyes. To her, Robb was just another wolf, a reminder that Ned had heirs who might rise against her children. Joffrey sneered at Robb, calling him a stupid northern pup, but Robb, proud as he was, never let his anger show. He only clenched his fists in silence, vowing that one day Joffrey would choke on his arrogance. It was when Bran's fall was reported that Robb felt his first true storm of rage in the south. He begged his father to strike at the Lannisters, sure they had been behind it, but Ned told him patience was wiser. Robb did not understand. "If we know the enemy, why wait?" he asked. Ned only answered, "Because truth and justice are not the same in this city. We must move carefully." Robb didn't like the answer, but he stayed by his father's side. And that choice, small though it seemed, began to change everything. Robb had always thought of himself as his father's son, and in King's Landing he began to understand what that truly meant. Every day, Ned carried himself with quiet honor, standing against whispers, half-truths and plots. Robb stayed at his side, watching carefully, learning. But while Ned was calm and cautious, Robb's blood burned hotter. He was young, proud, and had the fierce temper of the North in him. And in the South, that temper found many sparks. The first spark came from Joffrey. The prince mocked Sansa openly, sneering at her northern manners, laughing at Arya's wildness. Robb clenched his fists but kept his tongue still until one afternoon in the training yard. Joffrey strutted in, with Sir Meryn Trant behind him. He mocked the way Robb held his sword, calling it sheep's play. Robb turned, eyes blazing, and before Ned could stop him, he challenged Joffrey then and there. The yard grew quiet. Lannister men smirked, Stark guards tensed, and Joffrey's smile flickered with doubt. He tried to laugh it off, but Robb pressed, his voice firm. "If you mock the North, you mock me. Let steel decide which of us is the pup." Joffrey refused, of course, but the moment carried weight. The young lion was shown as a coward before many eyes, and the young wolf earned whispers of respect. Ned later scolded Robb in private, but he also admitted something with a sigh. "You are your grandfather's grandson, Robb. Rickard Stark had fire like that. But here, fire draws blades." The second spark came with the Lannisters' power games. When word spread of Bran's fall, Robb's temper burned again. He told his father, "If we bend our necks now, they will cut them later." Ned looked weary, but Robb's words stayed with him. Perhaps for the first time, Ned began to weigh his son's instincts, and then came the moment that truly shifted the tide, the day Ned discovered the truth about Cersei's children. In the real tale, Ned went to warn the Queen in private, giving her a chance to flee before Robert's return. But this time, with Robb at his side, things unfolded differently. Robb had been with him when he looked over Robert's bastards in the city. He saw the dark hair, the clear proof. That night, in the quiet of Ned's chambers, Robb pressed him hard. "You cannot warn her," Robb said. "If you give her time, she will strike first." "That's what wolves do, father. They kill the deer before it escapes." Ned frowned deeply, his honor fighting against his son's instinct. "I will not be the man who brings ruin on children," he said. But Robb leaned closer, his voice low, almost desperate. "And if you hesitate, father, those children will sit the throne and one day kill us all. Is it better to risk them or the whole of our house?" It was not an easy thing. It tore at Ned's heart. But Robb's presence made the decision heavier, harder to ignore. And so, for the first time, Ned Stark hesitated to show mercy. He did not warn Cersei. He did not write the letter to give her the chance to run. Instead, he began to quietly gather proof, waiting for the moment Robert returned from the hunt. That single choice started to shift the great wheel of fate. But King's Landing had no shortage of enemies. Cersei grew suspicious quickly. Her spies whispered of Ned's inquiries, of Robb's bold words, of how the wolf pup had nearly cornered Joffrey in the yard. She began to see not just one Stark as a threat, but two. And so her plans grew sharper. Meanwhile, Robb was not blind to the dangers around him. He noticed the way Petyr Baelish watched them with sly smiles, offering friendship that always tasted like poison. He saw Varys slither through the court, whispering of greater games that stretched far beyond the capital. And more than once, he caught the Hound watching him with a curious eye, as though weighing whether the wolf pup was worth noticing. The real test came when Robert went hunting. Without the king's shield, the Starks stood exposed. The Lannisters struck fast, trying to seize Ned and force him into silence. But this time Robb was there. When Lannister men stormed into the Tower of the Hand, it was Robb who drew steel first, leading the Stark guards into a bloody fight across the halls. It was short and brutal, but it gave Ned the time he needed to escape into the Red Keep's deeper corridors. Afterward, Ned looked at his son differently. "You saved us this day," he said. Robb only shook his head. "I only did what you taught me, to guard my family." But in truth, Robb had done more. He had forced the Starks into action before they could be cornered. That night, as Robert lay dying from the boar's wound, Ned's path was clear. He no longer thought of warning, no longer dreamed of gentle solutions. He thought of Robb's words, the fire in his son's eyes. And when Robert's final breath left him, Ned moved swiftly to secure the throne for Stannis. But the lions had claws, and they would not go quietly. Robb could feel it. As he stood with his father in the throne room, as he heard the whispers grow into shouts, as he saw Joffrey's pale face twist with rage. The South was not a place where honor won the day. It was a place where wolves had to bare their teeth or be hunted, and Robb Stark, young as he was already ready to fight. The throne room was tense, like a bowstring drawn to its limit. Ned Stark stood before the Iron Throne with the paper in his hand, the dying king's will naming Stannis Baratheon as rightful heir. Robb stood at his side, one hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The air smelled of sweat and fear, though no one would admit it. Cersei's eyes glinted like green glass as she stood near Joffrey. She wore her calm mask, but her fingers clutched the arm of her chair too tightly. The moment Ned read Robert's words aloud, silence fell across the hall. Joffrey, red-faced and trembling, shouted, "I am the king! I am the blood of Robert Baratheon, not Stannis!" Ned's voice was firm. "You are not Robert's son. The truth cannot be hidden. The rightful king is Stannis." The words hit the hall like an axe splitting wood. Lords gasped, guards shifted, and whispers spread like fire. But Robb, standing tall in his Stark furs, did not wait for the lions to roar. He stepped forward, his young voice carrying across the chamber. "Any man who denies this truth serves treason. The wolves of the north will not bow to bastards and liars." It was a dangerous thing to say in that hall, but his boldness stirred the crowd. Some lords hesitated, even the gold cloaks seemed uncertain, and in that heartbeat of doubt, Ned struck harder than in the true tale. He ordered his guards to seize Joffrey and Cersei before they could act. Steel rang out, gold cloaks moved, some toward Ned, some toward the Lannisters. But this time, Robb was not there to be held hostage in Winterfell. He was here, at his father's side, and his sword came free with the speed of youth. He cut down the first man who rushed them, a gold cloak with more greed than loyalty, and his courage lit the Stark men like a spark to dry tinder. The fight was fierce, quick, and bloody. By the end, Cersei was dragged away screaming, Joffrey kicking and spitting like a spoiled child denied his toy. Ned stood with the king's will in his hand, blood on his boots, and Robb beside him, panting, his blade slick with his first true kill. The hall was no longer Cersei's den. It belonged to the Starks and their allies. But victories in King's Landing are never without cost. That very night the city boiled with unrest. Lannister banners rallied in secret corners. Gold cloaks bribed by Cersei turned against the Starks, and word spread quickly that wolves had sunk their teeth into lions. Varys visited them in the dark hours, his voice soft, warning of shadows yet to come. "You have declared war, Lord Stark. Make no mistake, this city will burn before the Lannisters surrender." Robb did not flinch at the words. "Then let it burn, so long as lions are the first to fall." His youth made him fearless, but Ned felt the weight. He knew the cost of war better than his son. Still, there was no turning back now. With Cersei imprisoned, Ned sent ravens north and east, calling for support. Letters to Winterfell, to the Eyrie, to Dragonstone. He named Stannis the rightful king and swore the North's loyalty. Robb watched as his father wrote, learning how swiftly words could turn into war. But not all allies were certain. Renly fled the city at once, gathering his own strength. Littlefinger whispered in ears, sowing doubt like seeds. The Tyrells remained silent, weighing which crown to follow. And all the while, Jaime Lannister struck like a wolfhound off its leash. He ambushed Stark riders in the Riverlands, burning villages and seizing Edmure Tully as prisoner. Robb wanted to ride at once. "Let me lead men north, father," he said. "I'll break Jaime before he can draw breath." Ned shook his head. "Your place is here. The Riverlands are far, and this war is larger than one battle." But Robb was not a boy anymore. He was restless, his blood singing for action. And when news came that Tywin Lannister was marching with 30,000 men, even Ned knew they could not sit idle. "Very well," he said at last. "You will ride with our banners. But remember, Robb, glory is nothing if it costs us the war." And so Robb Stark rode out from King's Landing, not from Winterfell. He carried the pride of the North with him, but also the weight of being more than just a son. He was becoming a commander. His bannermen, though few, saw in him the same boldness they had once followed in Ned. The young wolf was no longer a shadow of his father. He was a force of his own. In King's Landing, Ned held firm. With Stannis sailing from Dragonstone and Robb riding north with Stark men, he tried to keep the capital steady. But enemies closed in like smoke. Assassins struck in the alleys, knives glinting in the dark. Loyal men vanished. Even Sansa was courted by Lannister sympathizers, whispering sweet lies into her ears. Arya, wild and sharp-eyed, warned Robb before he left. "They will kill father if you don't come back soon." Robb promised her he would return, but even as he rode out, he felt the truth clawing at his chest. The South was a pit of snakes, and every step into it pulled them deeper. By the time his host reached the Riverlands, the land was already aflame. Villages smoked in the distance, women wept over dead husbands, and children wandered homeless. Robb's heart hardened. This was no longer about honor or crowns. This was survival, vengeance, and the future of the North. Standing on a burned field one night, he whispered to Grey Wind, his great direwolf, "If father cannot be the wolf they fear, then I must." The beast growled low as though in agreement. And so Robb Stark, once just the boy who dreamed of battles, was now a commander of men. And the war of lions and wolves had truly begun. The Riverlands were burning. Wherever the young wolf's host marched, the signs of Lannister cruelty were carved into the land, villages reduced to ash, rivers running red with the blood of innocents, and fields left trampled beneath mailed boots. Robb saw it all, and it hardened him. The boy who had once laughed with Jon in Winterfell's yard was gone. In his place rode a commander with steel in his eyes and vengeance in his heart. His men noticed. They whispered of how Robb never flinched when he passed the corpses hanging from trees, how his dire wolf Grey Wind prowled beside him, snarling at the scent of lion banners. Some said the beast carried the rage of the old gods, that the wolf and the boy shared one spirit. Whether true or not, it made the men march with pride. They were following more than just Ned Stark's heir. They were following a young wolf who already smelled of war. The Riverlords welcomed him as though he were their savior. House Tully was desperate. With Edmure in chains and Tywin Lannister pressing deeper into their lands, Riverrun stood alone. Catelyn Stark met her son at the Tully gates, her eyes sharp with worry and pride. "You came south far too young," she said, her hand on his cheek. "But I see a man now, not a boy." Robb answered her with quiet fire. "I did not come south to play at being a man, mother. I came to break lions." Word soon reached him that Jaime Lannister himself led the siege against Riverrun. The Kingslayer, golden and deadly, already boasted of crushing Tully resistance. Many counseled Robb to wait for more men before marching, but Robb refused. "If we wait, Riverrun falls, and with it the Riverlands. If we strike now, we strike at the heart." His decision was bold, reckless to some, but it stirred his bannerman's blood. At dawn, the wolves moved. Robb divided his force, sending riders to harass Tywin's supply lines while he led the main host toward Riverrun. Grey Wind loped ahead, the direwolf's growls echoing through the mist, setting hearts pounding in the darkness. By the time Jaime's scouts realized what was coming, the young wolf's teeth were already bared. The clash outside Riverrun was savage. Lannister banners gleamed in the sun, their lines disciplined and strong. But Robb drove his men like a storm. He fought at the front, his sword flashing, Grey Wind tearing through horses and men alike. The sight of the wolf ripping apart red-cloaked soldiers shattered Lannister morale. "The gods send monsters with the Starks." Some cried before fleeing. Jaime did not flee. The Kingslayer carved through Robb's guard like a blade through silk, his golden armor gleaming, his smile cruel. For a heartbeat he seemed like the warrior songs promised. Unbeatable, unstoppable. But Robb was no singer's tale. He was a wolf in truth, and he met Jaime blow for blow. Steel rang against steel, sparks flying as the two clashed amidst the chaos. "You fight well, for a boy." Jaime sneered as their blades locked. Robb pushed back, his jaw tight. Better than a man who stabs kings in the back. The duel was fierce but short. Grey Wind lunged at Jaime's flank, forcing him off balance. Robb struck hard, his sword knocking Jaime's blade from his grip. In another heartbeat, the Kingslayer was on the ground, his neck beneath Robb's steel. The Lannister lines faltered at the sight, panic spreading like wildfire. Their commander, the pride of Casterly Rock, was captured by a boy not yet 16. The Riverlands roared with triumph. Jaime Lannister, chained and beaten, was paraded into Riverrun. The songs would soon spread of how the young wolf humbled the golden lion. But Robb did not smile at his victory. He looked down at his blood-stained hands and whispered to Grey Wind, "This is only the beginning." Inside Riverrun's halls, his mother warned him, "You hold a lion by the throat now. They will come for you with fire and steel." Robb nodded. "Let them come." The North remembers. News of Jaime's capture struck King's Landing like a thunderclap. Cersei, locked in her chambers as Ned's prisoner, screamed her fury, her voice echoing down the Red Keep's halls. Tywin roared in rage, swearing to tear the Riverlands apart stone by stone. Even Joffrey, now little more than a pawn without his mother or uncle, shook with fear when whispers of Robb's victory reached the capital. For Ned, the news was both blessing and burden. With Jaime in chains, the Starks held a priceless prize. Yet it also meant the Lannisters would stop at nothing. Varys came to him that night, eyes glittering like dark gems. "Your son has done what no man dared," the spider whispered. "He has made the lion bleed. But lions do not die quietly." Robb knew it too. Victory brought danger, and danger demanded choices. The River Lords begged him to strike west, to carry fire into Lannister lands, while their enemy reeled. His bannermen urged caution, to hold River Run and wait for Stannis' move. Robb listened, but his heart already leaned toward war. He had tasted blood, and he would not sit idle while lions prowled free. Yet in quiet moments, he remembered his father's words, "Glory is nothing if it costs us the war." He looked at Jaime, chained and sneering in the dungeons, and wondered whether sparing him would be the wiser move, or if the Kingslayer's death would end the game before it grew too deadly. That night, Robb stood on Riverrun's walls, looking out at the smoking fields, the stars cold above him. Grey Wind pressed against his side, growling softly. Robb whispered almost to himself, "If father was the honor of the North, then I must be its teeth." The young wolf had drawn blood, and now the whole realm trembled to see if he would bare his fangs again. River Run celebrated into the night, but war never rests long. The fires of victory still burned when the first grim tidings arrived. Tywin Lannister was moving. His great host of 30,000 men marched north and west, burning, pillaging, and crushing villages under their boots. The old lion had learned of Jaime's capture, and his fury was the kind that left kingdoms trembling. Robb sat at the war table in Riverrun's hall, his mother on one side, Blackfish Tully on the other. Maps lay stretched before him, rivers and valleys marked with stones for soldiers and tokens for castles. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "We cannot wait for Tywin to come to us. Every village he burns weakens our strength. We must strike first." Catelyn frowned. "Your father taught you patience, Robb. Tywin is not Jaime. He is no reckless knight, but a man who calculates every move. If you rush to him, you may march into his jaws." Robb looked at her, eyes colder than the boy she remembered. "And if we sit idle, he will crush us piece by piece until the Riverlands are ashes. We fight now, or we fight never." The Blackfish studied him with approval. "The boy speaks with a wolf's heart. Better to strike quick than wait for the lion's teeth." So it was decided Robb would split his forces once again. Small bands of riders were sent to harry Tywin's supply trains, cutting off his food and wagons. Meanwhile, Robb himself would march with the main strength, moving not toward Tywin directly, but deeper into the Riverlands, to rally more men to his banner. "Let Tywin chase shadows," Robb said, his fist striking the table. "When he grows weary, we will strike his flank." Word of Robb's boldness spread like wildfire. The River Lords, once broken and beaten, now flocked to his banner. They spoke of the young wolf with awe, whispering how Grey Wind stalked through the camps like a spirit of vengeance. How Robb himself rode at the front with eyes that promised no mercy. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Ned Stark heard these reports with mixed heart. He was proud of his son, yes, but also fearful. He knew war could raise a boy into a legend or grind him into dust. The city around him grew ever more dangerous. With Cersei still imprisoned, the Lannister loyalists plotted openly. The gold cloaks shifted like reeds in the wind, some loyal to Ned, others waiting for richer coin. Even in the Red Keep, whispers carried knives. Sansa grew restless, begging her father to show mercy to Joffrey to free the queen. "If you keep them in chains, they will hate us forever," she wept. Ned's voice was stern. "The truth is not softened by mercy. Sansa, the North does not kneel to lies." But her tears pierced him. For he knew she was still a child, caught in a game too cruel for her heart. Arya, in contrast, thrived in the tension. She shadowed Syrio Forel in the training halls, slipping through the Red Keep like a shadow cat, listening, watching. More than once, she brought tidings to Ned of strange men meeting in the alleys, of whispers about plots against her father. Robb's absence sharpened her resolve. "He fights battles with swords," she told her father, "but I'll fight them with ears and eyes." Back in the Riverlands, Robb's war grew fiercer. His riders struck hard, burning Lannister wagons, slaughtering foraging parties, leaving lion corpses to rot along the riverbanks. Tywin, furious, pulled his army tighter, less willing to risk his men on open roads. But Tywin was no fool. He soon shifted tactics, sending ravens to allies far and wide, calling on the might of House Frey and House Tyrell. The Freys, of course, hesitated, sniffing the wind like hounds. Lord Walder sent word to Robb, "Cross my bridge, but it will cost you dearly." Robb scowled at the message. "The day will come when men remember who stood with us and who sold their honor for coin." Still, he knew he could not yet burn bridges. Not when war pressed so close. His real test came at Oxcross, where his scouts discovered a detachment of Tywin's men encamped in the hills. Some urged caution, it could be a trap, but Robb's blood ran hot. If we let them march, they will join Tywin's host. If we crush them, we show the realm that lions can bleed. Under cover of night, the wolves descended. Grey wind tore through the Lannister camp, sowing chaos, while Robb's riders struck like thunder. Fires rose into the sky, screams split the darkness, and when dawn broke, the field was littered with red cloaks and broken spears. Robb himself cut down the enemy commander, his blade flashing red in the morning sun. When word reached Tywin, he raged, his golden cup shattering against the walls of his tent. "The boy thinks himself a king already," he snarled. "Then let us treat him like one. Bring me his head, or burn the Riverlands until he has no men left to follow him." Robb, hearing of Tywin's wrath, only smiled grimly. "Let him come. The North remembers," but beneath his confidence doubt stirred. Each victory cost him lives, good men who would never see their homes again. At night, he lay awake, staring at the canvas of his tent, wondering if he was truly winning, or simply buying time with blood. His dreams were haunted by faces of the dead, by grey wind's howls echoing in the darkness. One night, his mother came to him quietly. She sat by his side, her hand brushing his hair, as she once did when he was a boy. "You carry the weight of the North on your shoulders, Robb, but you are not alone. Remember that. You fight for Winterfell, for your sisters, for your father. Do not let pride blind you," Robb nodded. But pride was a hard beast to master. He was young, and the fire in his blood burned too fiercely to cool. And as winter's chill began to creep into the Riverlands, a raven arrived from the north, bearing news that would change everything. Winterfell itself was under threat. The raven came at dawn, wings black against the pale sky. Its message was short, but its weight could have toppled castles. "Winterfell is threatened. Ironborn have landed. The North calls for its lord." Robb read it twice, his jaw tight, the paper trembling in his hand. The Riverlands still burned, Tywin still marched, and Jaime still lay in Riverrun's dungeons. But the words cut deeper than any of that. His home, his blood was in danger. When he told his mother, Catelyn's face paled. "Theon Greyjoy," she whispered, "he was ever too close to your father's heart. I should have seen this coming." Her voice cracked with anger and grief, but Robb's was steady, almost cold. "If the North falls, all else falls with it. River Run, King's Landing, crowns and thrones, they mean nothing if Winterfell burns." His bannermen were divided. Some shouted that to abandon the Riverlands now would be to hand victory to Tywin. Others said the young wolf had no choice. His roots were in the North, and if he left them unguarded, he would lose everything that made him strong. The Blackfish advised striking fast at Tywin before turning north. "Break him once, and he will limp back to Casterly Rock with his tail tucked," he urged. But Robb shook his head. "Every step we take southward is a step away from Winterfell. The lions may bleed us here, but the krakens will gut us at home." So Robb made his choice. He would march north, even if it meant leaving River Run vulnerable. He placed command of the Riverlands in the Blackfish's hands, promising to return with the North's full fury. Jaime Lannister remained chained in the dungeons, a hostage too valuable to risk moving. "Let the Kingslayer rot," Robb said. "If Tywin wants his son back, he will have to crawl to me in the snows of the North." Before he rode, he knelt beside Grey Wind, resting his forehead against the great wolf's muzzle. "Home," he whispered. "We go home." The beast growled low, as though it understood. News of Robb's march north reached King's Landing swiftly. Ned, still holding the capital in Stannis' name, felt torn. The North needed its lord, but the capital was a nest of vipers. Each day, he played the Game of Thrones against men like Littlefinger and Varys, knowing one slip could cost him and his daughters their lives. He sent a raven to his son, his words heavy with both pride and warning. A wolf must guard his den. But remember, wolves who bare their teeth too soon often fall to spears. Robb read the letter beneath torchlight, his men sleeping around him. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he crumpled the parchment and tossed it into the fire. "Father guards the south," he said aloud. "I will guard the north." The march was brutal. The Riverlands lay broken behind them, and the closer they came to the neck, the more weary and hollow-eyed the men grew. Yet the North rallied at the news. From White Harbor to the Dreadfort, from Barrowton to the mountains, stark banners rose once more. The North had heard the call of its young wolf. When Robb finally reached Winterfell, the sight cut him deeper than any blade. The walls were scorched, the gates battered, and smoke still curled from the village beyond. Theon Greyjoy had struck like a vulture, seizing the castle in Robb's absence, only to lose it to Stark loyalists who fought tooth and nail to reclaim it. Theon was gone, fled back to the sea, but the damage remained. Robb walked the halls of his childhood with Grey Wind at his side, his boots echoing in the silence. Every stone seemed to whisper of what had been lost: innocence, trust, home. But the North had not fallen. Winterfell still stood, bloodied but unbroken. That night, before the heart tree in the Godswood, Robb swore a vow. His voice was rough, carried on the cold air. "No more will the wolves be scattered. No more will lions or krakens or vipers take what is ours. I will bind the North in blood and iron, and none will break us again." His bannermen, gathered behind him, raised their swords and cried, "The King in the North!" The title had been spoken before, but now it rang with new fire. Robb Stark was not just Ned Stark's son, not just a boy who rode south with his father. He was the wolf who had bled lions, broken krakens, and returned to claim his den. In King's Landing, the cry reached Ned's ears at last. For a moment he closed his eyes, torn between pride and fear. Robb was no longer his boy. He was a king in truth, and kings in Westeros walked a path lined with daggers, but perhaps this time the daggers would find other throats. With Stannis rising, the Lannisters weakened, and the North united under Robb, the game had changed. Still, Ned knew the truth. In the south, no victory lasted long. War was not a storm that passed. It was a tide, rising and falling, dragging all with it. And in the distance, beyond lords and lions and wolves, other shadows stirred. Whispers of dragons, rumors of dead men walking in the far north, but that was for another time. For now, a boy who should have stayed in Winterfell had ridden south, and by doing so had torn the realm apart and reshaped it with his teeth. The young wolf had bared his fangs, and Westeros would never be the same.